Acrobatics. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Go ahead and keep working on your quiz if you're not finished with that. My name is Tanya Barch, and I am with Reliant Behavioral Health, and we are your Employee Assistance Program vendor. Our materials say RBH, so you'll also know us by RBH. And as we go through the presentation today, I just want to remind you of your Employee Assistance Program benefits that you do have available to you. If you're going through a stressful situation and you want a little bit of extra help or want to talk to a counselor about that, or you're having financial issues, or maybe you have a legal issue, you do have those benefits available for free to you, provided by the state of Montana. So I encourage you to take a look at that. We'll be up here afterwards if you have any personal questions you want to ask. And also I want you to keep in mind as we go through this resilience training today, this is a group training that's 2 hours long, but we also have one-on-one coaching. That's a 6-month-long intensive program where you get to work with our coaches, and Dr. Eric, our presenter today, is one of our coaches and runs the program. If that's something that you might be interested in, I would encourage you to talk to your Human Resources Department or talk to your EAP manager, Karen Wood, and she'll give you more information on how you could access that benefit. So with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Eric Gustafson. He flew all the way from nice, warm, sunny California to be with us today, and so we welcomed him with our good Montana weather.
Yes, you did. Thank you, thank you. You know, I love the snow, but I don't know how you guys live in it. I love to go to the mountains and go ski and then come back. And I was hoping to get some skiing in when I was out here. And a couple weeks ago, or after Christmas, I seemed to have this kind of tragic episodes in my life. This is the second year in a row I've torn an ACL. And so there goes my season again. So how resilient am I is the question. So I've been working on this myself. And what we're going to do today is we're really going to engage you in the process. You all, we all have a relationship with stress. And I want to challenge us to think about that relationship with stress, and maybe just to adjust it a little bit. Maybe to take some steps where we can look at it differently in a way that on a daily basis, we're doing something just a little bit different. And what we're going to talk today about is the mindset shift that we can go through when we're stressed or in perspectives of stress. There's a lot of things that you all know, what to do under stress or how you manage your stress. You may have hobbies, or you may do meditation, or you go do exercise, or you have a particular relaxation techniques, and all of those are very important in terms of managing stress. And yet, there's the critical part that we want to talk to you about is the mental part of that. In the behavioral health world, we have somewhat done a disservice on our teaching about stress, and we found in the last few years a lot of the research on stress has shifted our perspectives. Okay, so we're going to talk. Basically, our talk today is everything I tell you is been research and literature founded. So some of it may be new, some of it is old hat to you, but the new stuff, I'm going to give you a copy of all of the slides, so you don't need to take copious notes. What I want you to do is to apply them, to ask questions about them, to wonder what it's saying. You'll get a copy of it later, and there's lots of references. There's a couple books that have all this research in it if you want to go further. But really, what I hope is that you personalize this in a way that says, you know what, I'm going to look and act on my stress a little bit differently. So, every day we face hassles, and stresses, and deadlines, and disappointments, and frustrations, and you may not break an ACL, but your thought may be, oh, bummer, my day is not going the way I thought it would. It's, you spill your coffee on the way to work, or somebody cuts you off, or you get to work and you find out that you've got a whole new, deadline that you weren't told about. Whatever it is, every day we have stress opportunities, don't we? Like, think of those opportunities. So when you think about it, think about your days. How many stress opportunities would you estimate that you have per day? Shout it out. 100. Pardon? A dozen. So we're all over the map. Yesterday in Missoula, somebody said 1,000. So somebody's really aware of their opportunities to be stressed. Okay, well, we all have them, and think about the opportunities. Social scientists say that it's about 30. I think they're underestimating, and they don't understand our lives, right? Those 30 stress opportunities, or however many we have, we respond to those. And the way that we respond to those can become habitual. It's sort of automatic to us, right? And it may be I get angry, or I get worried, or I withdraw, or I attack, or I defend, or I complain. We have these habits, and we have these habitual thoughts that come to mind. We're going to talk about those thoughts. You guys have thoughts that come to your mind like I do? If you talk to yourself, good. So the thing is those habits end up affecting our mood, affect our health, affect how productive I'm going to be today, affect my relationships with others, right? And so in terms of daily hassles, we're going to talk about how is it that can I affect those habits? Can I make a shift in those habits and improve my mood, my health, my relationships, and my productivity? So there was this wise guy, and he once said, I'm an old man, I've known a great many problems, most of which never happened. Anybody else worry and see, we develop in our mind the worst case scenarios. We prepare ourselves. It's kind of natural because we are protective as individuals, and our mind tries to get ourselves under control, understand what's happening, understand the possibilities. And that's all great and fine, except some of us, like him, kind of stay in the worst case scenarios or what possibly could go wrong and going to take the joy out of life, right? Yesterday, I drove from Missoula to here. Okay, this is going to be, dangerous. It's going to be scary. Got to be careful what could happen, And if I'd been in an accident recently in the snow, I'm going to have a stress response to this possibly. I'm going to be really on edge and really keyed up. So on the way over, I got to follow Tanya and Brandy, and they were going pretty fast. So they're Montanaites, and we're passing all the snow plows, and I'm trusting them. And so what the stress did, as I was thinking about it, I go, okay, this is actually pretty kind of fun. It's like an adventure. So I tried to change the stress of it, the this could be really bad, to okay, I'm going to be safe. I've got a four-wheel drive. We're taking all the precautions that we can. I'm not going to, I know how to drive in the snow. I've gone through, training and that kind of thing, and I've done a lot of sliding out. And, although in California, we use chains when it snows. I don't know. You guys trust your tires, but you've come to learn that if you drive through, we have a bunch of crazy drivers in California. They get into the snow and watch out. So you got to be really cautious. Anyway, I came away from the experience feeling like that was an adventure. How did I do that? What happened? No idea. Some, you know, other people, you ever look at stress and go, this is kind of thrilling. This is interesting. This is, you know, I'm glad I got over that. I just accomplished something, right? So let's think about your relationship with stress. You know, are you the kind of person that, you know, just anticipates that daily dread? Are you the kind of person that, you know, walks around with a load on your shoulders? Well, maybe it helps you, you like to, you know, take it on yourself and you're all alone in your stress. Some of you like to share your stress. Some of you, you know, share a lot of your stress and tell everybody else about your stress. Some of you like to take charge of your stress and go at it and attack it. Some of us avoid stress. Some of us see stress as a challenge. Some of us are stress junkies and like the sensation of it and either, you know, go out and do exciting, you know, extreme sports or extreme relationship drama, one of the two. And those, you know, you can be a stress junkie. So we all have this relationship with stress. And what you have in, you know, inside of you is, you know what you do with stress. And, you know, sometimes you've shared that with others, most of us do. And what you have today is an opportunity. Next to you is another stress expert. So you're all stress experts, and you're going to consult with each other. So those of you that are online, your job is either to find somebody, if you're plugged in from home and talk to your dog, or you can take these exercises, and I encourage you, if you're alone, to write them out, or to get together with somebody in your office and partner up. So I want each of you to partner up, 2 of you, 3 at the most. So I don't want anybody left out. And we're going to give you a few minutes and we're going to talk to each other. So the first assignment is, what is a stress that you're facing and how are you handling it? You know, or a recent stress and how you handle it. Good or bad? Okay? So we want to, turn to your stress consultant and pair off, or 3 of you at the most, and get going. Okay. So that bell is our 15-second warning just to wrap up your conversation. So, you got to know your stress consultant. You've used them and continue to use them. I'm glad some of you got to know somebody new. So, when we talk about stress, we think about it in a number of different ways, and it shows up in the literature in different ways. So we have to figure out, when we do these studies on stress, what are we talking about? When we talk to each other about stress, what are we talking about? So stress is made up of something that we call, as scientists, stressors. That's the things that knock us out of balance. That may be something that is circumstance, you know, a person, a situation, or it could be a thought in our mind, an expectation, our own pressure. That's the stressor. So it's the outside force or something that's knocking us out of balance. So when we talk about stress and say, I'm under a lot of stress, sometimes we mean I'm under a lot of pressure, I'm under a lot of demand, I'm under a lot of change. You know, those are the things, that's what we're talking about. We really kind of refer to as stressors. The other is the stress response. What my body and mind do to try to reestablish the homeostasis, the balance in our lives, the control, the response to stress. Okay? And so there's the stressor and the stress response. And then we also, when we talk about stress, we've got to recognize there is quite a continuum of stress, from the external stressors and the internal stressors, from daily hassles to kind of mid-range stress of, you know, life is changing, losing my job, moving, or a relationship is breaking up, a diagnosis of an illness. These are kind of the mid-range, and for some of us can be really large stressors, depending on what its meaning is to us, how much it's upsetting our current balance, our current, establishment of how I'm managing life. If it blows up my whole world and what it means to me, it can be big. But then there's the life-altering tragedies of some kind of violence against yourself, or you see some horrific act, or last week I was down at Umpqua Community College in Oregon and worked with them on post-traumatic growth. They went a year and a half ago through a traumatic experience of a shooting on campus, and a number of students, one faculty member killed, a lot of people injured. Those are high-level, severe, significant stressors. We work with Katrina victims and 9/11, and but we've all had mid-range, and sometimes some of us have had severe level stressors. In fact, there's about a 1 out of 5 chance that we're going to have a severe level stress event happen to us. So just so we know, we're talking about stressors, our stress response, and we've got these different levels of stress that we're talking about. So back in the 30s was when Dr. Selye, I like to call him Grandpa Selye, Grandpa of Stress, because he is the grandfather of us starting to study stress. And he was a physician that then got into research and started studying, using rats to study changes of all these hormone injections. So he was trying to see what kind of physiological responses happened with a particular hormone. They were trying to identify what these hormones did. And this guy, he didn't get very good training in animal care, and he just basically kind of put his rats in these cold environments and alone. He tried to feed them sometimes, and he put the aggressive ones in with the tame ones, and so he had his group of rats. So he injected one group of them with this hormone, and he injected the control group with some saline solution or some inert thing, and so then those that had the hormone injection, they started getting bleeding ulcers and immune systems were shutting down. He said, I found that this hormone here is really destructive to the immune system and the health, and so I got it. Well, then he checked his control group, and guess what? His control group had the same bodily symptoms. And he said, okay, it's not the hormone. And that's what he discovered, and thought back to his patients in his practice that had all these physical problems, and yet, there wasn't a physiological diagnosis that they could make. They were just kind of the worried well, or the sickly patient. And he started to say, there's something, and he called it stress. And so this is what stress is. It's the body's reaction to demands placed upon it. Now, he was Hungarian, and he didn't understand English very well, he said. And later, after he'd gone the worldwide and talked about stress, and everybody started doing stress research, he said, you know what? I've used the wrong English word. It shouldn't be stress, because what I'm talking about is the stress response. He's talking about the body's response. He said, the word should be strain. Sort of, you think about, I've got a big rubber band here that if I were to, here it is. Those of you that are on the web, you can't see this, but I've got a big rubber band in my hand, and basically as I pull the rubber band, it is I'm the stressor. My hands, as I pull it, I'm the stressor, and I'm putting a force on the rubber band, and the band is being strained. it can handle so much force. It's kind of like the load of a bridge. How much load can a bridge handle before it buckles? And so it's an engineering term. And so when he says, the word should have been strained, well, we're not going to change the word and say, I'm now strained. Or you can start doing that if you want to. I feel so strained today. So you can still use the word stress, but think about it that way. We all have like different abilities to handle stress, don't we? You ever think about, how come this good person I know over here handles things so well? Takes on more responsibility, rises to the occasion, doesn't seem to be as worried or negative or bothered, and handles so much. And I'm just really impressed by somebody who can handle so much. Well, I think of them as having a bigger, stronger rubber band. They've got some skills. They've got some resources that they're using. What is it that makes them, and I call them resilient? They can handle a lot more. They can handle a lot more load. Now, research continued, and the other major definer of stress was Dr. Lazarus, and he said this: stress is, or strain, but stress is when the demands we experience exceed our ability. It doesn't just say ability, though. It says, or perceived ability, right? To meet those demands. So I may have abilities to stand up to the stress and deal with it, or what's really important, I think, is what's my perception of my ability to handle this stress? And that perception tells us it's really subjective. Stress is a subjective thing to us, how we see it. That in a sense, it's our attitude or our mindset or our confidence in what we can handle is a critical factor. There are abilities, there are resilient skills that people have. People have the ability to say, let's say, my driving yesterday, if I, was a professional driver, then I'd have, resilient skills to handle almost any condition. So we can train ourselves to be more resilient, but I also need to believe, or I need to have perspective about this stressor in my life and put it into perspective, put it into its place. Maybe I'm believing that it's bigger than it should be, or I'm believing, like Mark Twain, that I'm creating problems that aren't there. I'm exaggerating. So since that time, we developed a lot of research about the harmful effects of stress. A lot of those in the way of health research. And we have believed and seen stress as something that is toxic to us, something to avoid, something to get rid of, something to minimize, that somehow we've got to reduce stress. So if I was here 10 years ago, I would be telling you a different story. I would be saying, yes, stress is toxic, so you need to run away from it. You need to reduce it. You need to do everything in your power to, avoid stress in your life. That's the kind of common psychological answer that we give. Now, and you may go to other stress seminars and you're going to find out the different relaxation techniques you can do, and those are good. And the different, skills that you can have, and those are important. And yet, if we keep up with this idea that stress is toxic, how are you going to get through your day when you know you've got stress, right? It's unavoidable. If you're in a relationship, there's stress. If you're a parent, there's stress. If you have any responsibilities, there's going to be stress. So stress is toxic, right? And in fact, you'll read the research and you read the headlines, and the headlines say stress will kill you. And in fact, there's a lot of evidence that it does. Let me cite a couple studies. One University of Wisconsin-Madison asked 29,000 people to rate their stress over the past year and how much they believe this stress influenced their health. A little, moderate amount, or a lot. So you're thinking about the stress over the last year. Then they monitored them for 8 years and looked at all the public death records and those who passed away. How many of us believe that stress is harmful to our health, and a stress that we've gone through in the last year can be harmful to our health? Okay, usually about 85% of people look at their own stress and go, this could be harmful to my health. I'm really concerned about it. All right, so people that reported having high levels of stress events and who believed also that stress had a large impact on their health had a 43% increase in risk of death over those 8 years. So what's the answer? Stress is toxic and stress kills, and it can. Another study, University of Buffalo, 850 people. They're asked to report their stressful events that they'd encountered in the past year again, and how much in the same period that they had helped others. So they're kind of looking for helping behavior. And these people, every major stress event of these people increased their risk of death by 30%. So we've got perception of stress as being harmful plus high stress events. I'm under a lot of stress. There's a 30 to 43% chance of me dying within several years to 8 years. We also, if I were here a few years ago, I would have just, instead of giving you a how resilient are you handout, I'd be giving you a stress inventory score. So basically you mark down all the stress events that you've had in the last year. Moving, a breakup, being a parent, changing jobs, taking out a new mortgage, and you get points related to how significant of a stressor those are. And if you get over a certain score, it would indicate to you how much of a chance you have of contracting a serious illness, a chronic stress illness in the next 2 years. And then I might say, okay, really work on that, reduce those stressors, and I hope you do a good job at that. Have a good day. Okay, so we could either be done with our stress seminar now and leave with that. Do you guys want to find out if there's any more hope? Is there any different way of looking at this? Please. I certainly wanted it, and so that's why I pursued the research on this. So I want you to turn to your stress consultant. We'll take a minute or two and, whoops, I'm giving you some answers. There's a delay in my pushing of buttons here. What are some of the negative effects of stress that you hear about, have heard about, or that maybe you've even seen go on with family members or friends? Okay, take a minute and a half or so, go. Consult. So if we actually offered M&Ms or something when the bell rang, we'd start salivating, right? Okay, so we found that unmanaged stress, has a lot of consequences to it. Here are a few of the unmanaged stress consequences, and you can think of some more. We also have, physiological effects of chronic stress. Yeah, and we find that different studies, somewhere between 60 and 80% of all doctor visits have some stress-related component, whether our condition is worse or caused by some stress in our lives or stress response. So, I mean, it's prevalent. It's even related to the top 6 causes of death. That we find that stress impacts the mortality rate. So, what we've understood is this fight, flight, and what we call now freeze response. The fight, flight response. Everybody's aware of that, right? And that's how we categorize stress. And it's very accurate in terms of what goes on, especially when we're in danger, when we need to protect ourselves, when we, see that we've got to respond in an instant. And so, that car that pulls out in front of us, for me, it's the flashing lights behind me. I start to get that panic. I have that way too often. And so, that response that goes on. So there is this, in the nervous system, this on switch. There's this sympathetic fight, flight, freeze response that just, kicks our physiological responding into high gear, right? It's like putting the gas pedal on. Now, what we've thought of is that most stress, or all stress, has a fight-flight response, and that it's an outdated mode of responding. Evolution, we should have not had this fight-flight response because we're not out in the jungle, we're not being chased by lions. Very few stressors are really worthy of fight-flight, and yet we have a fight-flight response. We're sitting at our desk and we can't run. We can't fight somebody. We might feel like we're just frozen and doing nothing, and then we'll just stop everything. But, what happens in the fight-flight response is that there are stress chemicals that get induced. You've all heard about adrenaline, and now cortisol as the main culprit as the stress hormone. So cortisol is, impacting what we just saw in terms of those diseases. That is what high cortisol levels impacts our health. It's what makes the stickiness in our veins and starts clogging and hardening our arteries. It decreases the heart's effectiveness. It starts eating away at the heart muscle. So cortisol can have negative effects. Problem is, all of us have cortisol levels. You wake up in the morning and your cortisol level starts to spike. What do you do about it? You can't get rid of cortisol. But what happens when you have this fight-flight response? All the important things in your body, get kicked into gear. Heart rate, blood pressure, respiratory response. The things that are unnecessary stop, like our digestive system and others. So when we're having those worries and those anxieties that are sort of just, the fight-flight response, and our stomach starts to bother us, that's because our digestive system has altered and stopped, or we start to get that heartburn. That's the same kind of thing. Anyway, it's a useful response, especially in danger. So the fact is, though, that we have an off switch, and that off switch is our recovery switch. After the zebra gets chased by the lion, there's a book out called "Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers," and it's true, they don't, and it's because they don't have this mind that says, "Uh-oh, it's going to happen again. It's going to happen again." They're far enough from the lion. They relax and they start grazing and taking care of their young and being with their herd, and so they have an off switch that's well trained. What happens that we understand in humans and in primates we've studied is there's these other neural hormone chemicals that come into place with the recovery, the off switch. That off switch is critical because there's especially this one called DHEA. The mixture of how much this good hormone that we have with cortisol and adrenaline ends up being the magic kind of response. DHEA helps flush out the cortisol. It helps reduce its stickiness in our blood flow. So it actually recovers us. Now, so how do we get this DHEA, this GABA, and there's others called brain-derived neurotropic factors, all these kinds of things you don't need to know, but what you need to know are there are these alternate chemicals that we can induce. How do we do that? Well, think about some of the things that you've been trained to do, and maybe that's deep breathing, focused deep breathing, or relaxation, imagery, progressive muscle relaxation, and those skills are important ones to learn to try to calm ourselves down. What I'm here to suggest is there's more to it, that we're constantly fighting with our mental perspective and our mindset. Because you think about it, there are other things that we do that set off the fight-flight response. It might be jumping out of an airplane. It might be going on a roller coaster. It might be, for me, driving in the snow in Montana. And, but I love skiing. I don't know what you love. Think about what you love to do that is fun. It might be a little bit dangerous, but you enjoy it. You got the same adrenaline and cortisol going on, but what happens is, what's the difference between what you're doing versus if you were falling off a cliff versus doing the bungee jump thing and know that you're going to survive? What's the difference? Choosing to do it, enjoying it. It's a perspective. I'm in control. I'm choosing to do this. My perspective is this is fun. It's thrilling. It's exciting. It's an adventure. Well, we can't all relate to this. This is too much for most of us. But whatever it is that's your thing, that's within your realm of danger, it might be gardening, but if it's dangerous in the garden. And my wife got bit by a spider in the garden, and she still goes back out there. So a lot of it is our perspective. I do want to mention and go over just a little bit severe stress. What happens in severe stress, in tragic stress, is that it kind of, instead of the daily hassles, severe stress really kind of breaks apart our world and what things mean to us, what's important to us, our feeling of control, our assumptions about the world being, I assume the world is going to be fair and good, and I'm going to be safe and I'm secure. All that gets kind of tragically broken, and it's difficult to pull the pieces back together, and sometimes trying to do that, things are never going to be the same. So I want to acknowledge that traumatic stress has the kinds of effects where we either need to grow from it, or we're going to forever be, under the consequences of that trauma. And it takes a while to get through trauma, and that's actually a normal response, is for the body to be taking, and the mind to be taking quite a while to recover. Because what happens is there's a part of our brain that is like the alarm, the signal that says, danger, danger, you've got to take cover, protect yourself, and that signal from the amygdala, a little part of our brain, overtakes our thinking part of our brain, which is the cortex, or our memory and our context part of the brain. So whenever we see something, we kind of look, is that dangerous or not? We have a second to go, okay, it's not. Or, immediately you see something and you associate how much danger you're in. What happens in severe trauma is you start, having any little reminder means it's a big reminder that you can't discriminate between the context. And so then you have all kinds of symptoms, and these symptoms are normal symptoms. They're normal symptoms to a very abnormal situation. So we would all have some of these symptoms. Post-traumatic stress disorder is when these symptoms continue on beyond the initial weeks or month or whatever it usually takes to start to those subside. If those symptoms aren't subsiding, they continue on. So it's this, alarm bell, this amygdala that gets set off in our mind. And the thing is, sometimes, this alarm bell then ends up affecting us in our daily stress, because any potential stress becomes a big deal. And, it just kind of overtakes our perceptions of everything. So a little bit about the trauma survivors literature that, that didn't come out right. Life-altering growth comes from trauma that shakes you to the core. Basically, you think about the daily hassles, that's not going to change your perspective on life, is it? Daily hassles, we just kind of have these habitual responses and walk around being irritated or angry or frustrated. It doesn't motivate us to take big change, although hopefully after today we can have a little bit of motivation to deal with those daily hassles. But life-altering trauma has the potential for life-altering growth, and we have to start to look for what is this all about? What is life about for me? A little problem. Growth is rethinking yourself and your world. So what that says is, there is no need to change, basically, if everything still makes sense. What severe trauma does is doesn't make sense anymore to the world that I expected to be living in. All right, so if it causes that impetus to grow, because I've got to remake sense of my world. So we look at the world we've been going through, and all of a sudden it gets shattered. We're constantly telling ourselves our stories, our own narrative that's going on in our minds. I'm this kind of person, or I'm living this kind of life, or life should be this way. We have these conscious or some sort of subconscious stories that are going on, and those stories get broken in traumatic stress. I want to encourage you that we continue those stories in our daily stress, and it's time to start challenging our stories and to actually honor the fact that some of the biggest traumas in our life is what we can learn from and that we can grow from, and that it's important to think back on the traumatic, almost formative parts of our life and maybe rethink those a little bit and see how they've helped us grow. How life is different, and yet in some ways you've become stronger and more resilient. Most of us who face traumatic events are relatively resilient. Most post-traumatic growth is much more common than post-traumatic stress disorder. Post-traumatic stress disorder happens in about 8% of people throughout their life. So post-traumatic growth happens in about the majority of people after traumatic stress. Okay, so that's what happened. Something got doubled up. Suffering can act as that catalyst to find new meaning in our lives. So this big foundational part of our understanding of the fact that we can survive through severe trauma comes from people like Viktor Frankl, who lost his family in the concentration camps, was in a concentration camp for years himself through World War II. And he ended up writing a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And he really, as he was going through the trauma, so the kind of trauma of ongoing terror of being in a camp like this, or being a prisoner of war, those kinds of situations are the worst kind, because you don't have control over your environment. It's unpredictable, it doesn't make sense, and you have very little choice. And yet, so what he evaluated and discovered and in his experience, and then talking to all the other survivors of the Holocaust, he saw a lot of resilient people coming out of that. And the main factors, what do you think the main factors were for getting through that kind of trauma and stress? What would you hold on to? Think about it. Yes?
Kind of like belief or hope that things can get better, change.
Yes, belief or hope in the future that things will change. So having some sense beyond the immediate experience that things can be different, that there is a possibility. He started to look at, any other thoughts? He started to look at, what do I have control over? I have control over my thoughts, my mind. I have control over how I respond to the people around me and how I respond to the guards. And I have control over these few things. And he focused on control, and he focused on, what am I going to do if I survive through this? Who am I going to be? So when it comes down to big trauma, we can learn how to handle less traumas. So the research shows that there are basically these major things that resilient people learn from severe trauma. And that is an increased sense, again, an increased sense of their own inner strength. They become open to life being more than they thought it was before. Relationships are much more important and closer and deeper. I heard a statistic that 25 years ago, we had 3 close friends that we would basically tell our life story to. If we got depressed and down, we would have 3 close friends that we could go to. Now the average is we have 1.5. And it's just we're becoming more isolated. In the midst of being ultra connected electronically, those relationships are great, but do I have somebody that can know my deepest, darkest fears and secrets and troubles and hopes and dreams? They come out of it appreciating life more. So we tend to go through life, we just kind of, try to survive. And if you've gone through major trauma, you start to appreciate life more. And then you look for meaning beyond yourself. And what is, more important in life for me? A sense of spirituality or connectedness to God, or something that is beyond, my daily world. I want you to turn to your consultant. You don't have to get too heavy now, but just, do you have any post-traumatic growth, either personal examples or ones that you've known from somebody else, how you've come out of that learning more, appreciating life more, what was that? Okay, and those of you that are online, either write it out or find somebody to talk to. Go. Consult. Okay. So we can learn from the biggest stressors in our life, those times of traumatic stress. Human resilience, what is it? Well, it's basically our ability to absorb high levels of disruptive change in our lives, to bounce back from those and even excel, even perform better or do better or find more meaning or improve those relationships in times of change and uncertainty without acting in dysfunctional ways. So that's an important part of the definition, because a lot of us, put our dysfunctional coping mechanisms in place. So, if you're to think about what some of your dysfunctional coping mechanisms might be, I do want to say, avoidance during the time of severe trauma recovery is actually healthy. That's you need to have a few weeks of just calming everything down, not doing much, because you're going to have too many things reminding that amygdala is just still firing, danger, danger. And we all need avoidance to the degree that we need distractions and so forth, but when they actually help keep us from facing what the real issues are and our ability to manage stress. Look at your quiz, the resilience quiz. And what I want you to do is to just yourself pick out one item that you think you could work on. Now, this isn't the end-all in resilience skills, but there are some suggestions here. So those of you that are on our webinar, it's on the handout, the resilience quiz. Pick one. So resilience skills can be learned, practiced. What we do in our resilience coaching, we've had close to 100 people from Montana go through our 8 to 10 session resilience coaching over a 6-month period of time. And basically, it's a training. And we ask people to commit to practicing at least 10 minutes a day of the resilience skills that we're committing to. So what we find is that discipline of actually practicing those skills and then kind of reporting as to how that went and what more you need to do or how to do it differently or how to adjust it and how to move on to the next skill, that's been critical in people being able to master their ability to manage stress better. So for you, I'd like you to commit to something or a couple things that you're going to walk away from today that you're going to work on. So we handed out 3x5 cards to you as you walked in. Those of you that are online, you have a questions box. And so if you have a question, I'm going to answer some in a break in just a minute and also at the end. But if you want to write out your questions and then hand them to that side over there, then Tanya will walk up in a few minutes and pick up your questions. So if you've got personal questions you want answered, we'll get to those in a minute. We all face adversity. The question is, how is it that we're going to cross that chasm into hope, into a different life, or into a new way of being? And what we're suggesting is that our mindset is a critical factor in being able to thrive right now in life and in health, and it's a daily choice. So Grandfather Selye said, it's not what happens to us, but what we do with it. So basically, stress, whether it's external stressors or more likely internal stress response, what I'm suggesting is it's actually a signal to pay attention to. It is an indicator that says, pay attention to me. There's something going on that needs action from you. And too often, we just try to shove that back down instead of listening to it. What we find is that we can learn to manage stress, and the more stress that we manage, we get through it, we actually inoculate ourselves, and we kind of vaccinate ourselves from poor stress responding in the future. Why is it, again, that some people handle tragedy or loss or change or difficulties, whether it's on the job or in relationships? Why is it that some people handle it better? Sometimes it's because they've learned through practice and through experience of difficult times. Sometimes it's just I've gone through life a lot more and known that there's more to life than this change in front of me is saying. There was important research done back in the 1980s that helped us with this. There was a big deregulation of the phone system back in the 80s. Some of us remember that. And the Bell Telephone was this huge conglomeration of tens of thousands of employees. And it got broken up and sized down, and people, moved jobs or were laid off, so many layoffs, and then the people that were remaining had incredible amounts of responsibility put on their shoulders to keep things going. Well, this psychologist, Dr. Salvador Matti, was a consultant for Bell Telephone and had been there for years. And the thing that Bell Telephone had done is they had kind of their own health clinics, and they were keeping physical medical data and some psychological data on all employees. And so Dr. Matti said, I've got some great data to figure out. He was curious. He sees some of these employees, were having stress reactions, we're getting sick, we're getting the ulcers, we're getting anxiety and depression, and saying, okay, but there's these other ones that seem to be thriving and seem to be managing the stress, that's obvious stress that everyone's going through. And what's the difference? So he was able to take all that pre-medical data and do some pre and post testing and psychological testing, and he basically found out that certain people become more hardy or more resilient or stronger through stress, and it's all because of their mindset. The difference was the people that didn't get sick, the people that didn't get depressed and major anxiety attacks, were the ones that looked at their stress and said, there's something more to life. This is a job. I'm going to take this job and do the best I can. I'm going to connect with the people that I've got left. I'm going to take control of what I've got control of. Make choices about the things I can make choices of. I can focus on all the things I can't do, the things I'm out of control of, or I can focus on what I am in control of, minimize my expectations, get through the day, focus on, I'm the president of my bowling league, and that's what I enjoy, and I'm just working for the weekend. And it's that perspective that was the difference in these people. So the question became, is there a positive side to stress? Is actually stress, can it be helpful? And what we've come to find in the recent research is that welcoming stress can actually boost our health, our performance, and more. I want to go back to the studies I cited about longevity. And so we had the 29,000 people of University of Wisconsin-Madison, and that 43% of those that had high stress and believed that their stress had an impact on their health. So they're thinking about their stress that they're going through, and they're believing it's having an impact negatively on their health. And they had a higher death ratio. But on the other hand, in that study, what they found was those that experienced a lot of stress but didn't perceive the effects of the stress as negative were among the least likely to die as compared to all other participants in the study. So these people also had high stress events, but perceived that their stress response that they were having was not harmful to them. It wasn't going to kill them. That they were going to be better. They were going to make it through. They had the least, mortality rate, the lowest mortality rate. The other study, University of Buffalo, 850 people, they measured their stress, but they also asked them, how much do you help others? How much do you volunteer, or do you turn around and do helping acts, kind acts to others? And they found, those that every major stress event increased the individual's risk by 30%. But overall, this increase was erased for those who reported high rates of helping others, even if they additionally dealt with a lot of stress. Same amount of stressors in their life, and reaching out beyond themselves into helping behavior, it basically was an inoculation from getting a stress-related disease that was going to kill them. Wow. That surprised me when I started looking at this research. So I propose that we take this definition of stress that Dr. McGonigal has given. She says stress is what happens, or what arises. The stress response is what arises when something that we care about is at stake. Now think about your recent stressors. What was it you cared about that you were responding to? Where we care about, like my stress about driving over from Missoula in the snow, I cared about my survival, right? And that was the stress. So we all are caring about something. Sometimes our perspectives are off and we're caring too much. We're caring too much about how we're going to be seen, or we're caring about our kids so much that we're these helicopter parents that we're protecting them from stress in their life, and we think that that's caring. So take a minute and turn to your consultant and try to identify in a recent stress what it is that you cared about. Go. Consult. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Let's do this. I'm going to answer questions, and we're going to take like a stretch break right after that. We've got a bunch of questions. Let's see. Can post-traumatic growth and post-traumatic stress exist together in one individual? Fantastic question. I went over that lengthy with my people last week at Umpqua. Yes, there's like a dual path that you can be experiencing the post-traumatic stress symptoms because the triggers keep showing up, or the nightmares or whatever that is, and yet if it motivates you to look for meaning in life, to connect with others, to reevaluate it, absolutely. It usually does in multiple paths, and it's important to be looking at the post-traumatic growth and kind of helping you to incorporate and internalize that resilience so that the post-traumatic stress symptoms can subside. And struggling with PTSD symptoms, sometimes it's a lifelong thing, and you just have to kind of recognize every so often I'm going to have a bad dream or be triggered by something. There are basically what happens like in anxiety conditions and generalized anxieties is that the stimulus of the feared object keeps getting paired with something in life, and we've got to kind of keep more facing that head on, whether that's processing it with somebody that's a professional or writing about it, but really identifying what it is that is scaring me in those triggers and how that is not the same thing as real life. What my life is really about now, what I care about now, what I value, what is my purpose. And those things start to fade out the post-traumatic symptoms. Looking at research in therapy animals. Oh, lots of good research in this topic. Absolutely. It's kind of like having your own personal, comfort. I see that as, that's like a resilience tool to have to go to. So, completely believe in that. How do I accept bad decisions from higher ups? Uh-oh. That harm the department. These will have long-lasting repercussions. I've been told to not care so much. Okay. So, what would Viktor Frankl say? I mean, that's sort of, we struggle with power and authority and things that get pushed down to us that are out of our control. What I found is that I need to look for what I am in control of and what kind of influence I can have on the people around me, my short area, little area of influence. And that might be a few relationships, or deciding that I'm going to, continue to be the kind of person that I know, the state wants me to be, or the department head above them. Whatever it is that's a value that I can hold on to that gives me more perspective. And in fact, sometimes I have to forgive people in power because, power sort of corrupts. Power sort of, makes quick decisions, and that's kind of their job, is they've got to make decisions sometimes on limited information. It's unfortunate, sad, but that's what happens. And the question that we all have to go through is, am I going to let this ruin my life and my job? And maybe eventually I need to look for other choices, but I really need to try out, can I live through this? Can I make my work environment something different for me? What areas do I have control over? How do you deal with the stress of a person not listening and being present in the moment, but they say they are listening? Ooh, good one. They're distracted by too many distractions, working on the phone and talking to them, that kind of thing. Well, that's tough. Especially, I'm an ADD person, so you got to kind of my wife has to go, Eric, look at me. But we're sort of an ADD society now with so many distractions. And, what I'm going to recommend that you do is find people that are good at this kind of thing, managing communication, and say, how do you handle that? And sometimes it is, instead of going to the worst case scenario, they don't care about me, or I'm going to get angry at them. What's a more resilient response? What's a response that says, I've got something important to talk to you about? I want you to hear this. Can you listen to me for a minute? So really determining when you need to be listened to and when you can just kind of move into, they're distractible. But what's important is not that they're distractible, but can I get them at a time or say, I need a time when we put our phones away and, I can talk to you and I want to hear from you too. How to best help others experiencing stress. That's good. So, if we're to help others in the midst of stress, it's kind of we need things like connection, we need things like listening ear, we need understanding, and that we can't control somebody else's response, but we can be that relationship, a therapy dog or whatever that is. So we can't control other people's stress, especially when we try to limit it for our kids, but the more we limit it, the stressors in their life, the more we're actually, limiting their potential. What about stress responses? Can you get to, personalizing it. When I've done this, I've learned this, or this is more important to me. Sort of giving your own personal resilience stories. EAP, yes, 4 sessions. Come talk to us about the EAP. We'll talk about that. Do you think people are too quick to rely on medicine as a way to cope with stress? Probably, and yet sometimes when we have disorder, the medication can help reorient our neurotransmitters. There are a lot of things we can do to cope with stress, and the limits aren't just medicine. Same question about medicine. Studies on the best strategies for managing stress without using medicine. Absolutely. In fact, what I would recommend you do is you read one of 2 books. One book, The Upside of Stress, is kind of the #1 book that I would do. Well, the other is Asked to Get in the Coaching Program. Well, here's a good one. How does relabel, reattribute, refocus, revalue fit into this? Perfectly. I couldn't have said it better. I don't know if this is somebody's outline for training good employees, but relabel, reattribute. So reattribute the it's not coming out from a negative intention. It's coming in from the best. Refocus and revalue. The more that we look at our values. And I'm going to attach, I'm going to give you all a copy of these slides, and I'm going to attach on a values exercise because that's been shown to be kind of the number one thing that changes stress responding for people is if I'm at the end of the day to look at, did I live out my values? I'm going to focus on a value of mine. Maybe that's being generous or being a person of integrity or being honest. And filter that through my events of the day and write that out and go, how, you know, am I living by my values? So I'll forward that to you. How do you handle a psycho coworker when you have no management support? Oh, I love that one. We'll just kind of let that one hang in the air. Okay, I want everybody to stand up and stretch for 60 seconds. Those of you on the webinar, we're back. Okay, there's a seminal work by Scott Peck that the first line of the book puts it all into perspective. And he goes on to say, you know, how to live a life of love, values, and spiritual growth. But the first line is, life is difficult. So we have these assumptions about life that we're not always aware that we live by, but when we're stressed out, it's because those assumptions are violated. So if I were to say, you know, life is, how else do you think we sometimes see life? Life is, or life should be. Life should be good. Life should be fair. Life should be easy. Like, those are perfect. Life should not be so difficult. But you know what? The reality is that life is difficult. The next paragraph. Once we truly know that life is difficult, once we truly understand and accept it, then life is no longer difficult. Because once it is accepted, the fact that life is difficult no longer matters. So if we're to face today the fact that there's going to be change, disruption, conflict, irritations, things that I'm not going to like. I'm going to be asked to do something that I don't want to do. I'm going to have too much on my plate. You know, I'm not going to get the attention that I deserve. You know, if I approach life that life should be easy, life should be comfortable, life should be fair, it's not. Life is difficult. So if we start with that premise, stress can be toxic, but the research shows that stress can also be fuel. It is fuel of motivation and energy. And it can go in two directions. It can be, we already got the energy of stress. You know, it can either be to impair my performance or to improve my performance. It can get me sick and disconnected, or I can become healthy and connected from my stress. It'll help me avoid danger. My stress can actually help me protect myself, protect others. Stress can help me focus on goals, and it can be that thing that pushes me to find new meaning, direction, values, or purpose in my life. Just kind of think about the positive effects of stress. Here's a few of them. So what we're suggesting, one key to dealing with stress is this mindset shifting. Basically, stress is a physiological arousal. Our stress response, let's think of our stress response, it's a physiological arousal. And we need to reappraise. What was that? I'm going to keep that. Ours, to put it in there. Reappraise or rethink The fight-flight response, remember, is a threat response. It brings anger, fear, anxiety, those chemicals. It's important for life-threatening events, and it will sensitize us to future threats that are similar. What we can do is, if we were to rethink the threat response that we're going through, okay, my danger in driving in the snow in Montana, into a challenge response. Okay, can I get through this? How am I going to make it? It becomes an opportunity to overcome. Whatever difficulty I'm facing today is an opportunity to get through and to overcome and to accomplish and to maybe even enjoy. We talked about stress junkies that enjoy doing things, that are high danger. Well, there's some excitement or joy in that, because stress response can be a challenge response. It can be what we call a excite or delight response. It brings in these other healthy neurochemicals. One of them is oxytocin. This oxytocin one has so many health benefits. Oxytocin actually strengthens the heart. It helps people from getting heart attacks. What's the easiest way to set off oxytocin in our system? It's called what? It's not exercise. It does some of that. Exercise is good for it. Exercise is good for DHEA, and the other one I called it's actually a fertilizer one, BDNF. Oxytocin is the hug hormone. It's the touch hormone. It's the love hormone. It's the trust hormone. There we go. They're getting some oxytocin. Two people just hug. That's what you do, and you're actually helping your heart, and you're combating the fight, flight, adrenaline and cortisol. That if I look at my arousal as purposeful, what is this telling me? Again, what is this arousal telling me that I care about? So I'm going to use my stress response as something that helps me focus on a goal as opposed to be fearful. All right, so we have the choice to either stay stuck or to learn. The stress response actually produces chemicals for learning. You ever think about, you go through stress, and then your mind, whether it's a conflict with somebody, and you keep playing it over in your mind afterwards. Your mind is really active and open because it's got these chemicals going on that are trying to help, DHEA is a big one, trying to help make sense of it and imprint it in our mind. That is the perfect opportunity right after stress, is to reevaluate and to go, how can I look at this differently? How important is this? Or is this just going to fit back in that same old mode of life is a hassle, I hate people, I'm going to avoid this. Right after stress is the important time to learn that. And stress is actually, meant to help us learn from our circumstances. Going through stress can make us better at it. Expecting to learn from stressful experiences actually alters our physical stress response. Turns it from a fight, flight to an opportunity, a challenge response, what we're going to call a tend and befriend or a protect and connect response. It changes the experience if we expect stress to be helpful to us. So, actually avoiding stress creates more stress. Think about it. Poor coping mechanisms, whether it's, just always going to video games or drinking or whatever, spending too much money. We need some distractions, but when that's all we do, we're end up just pushing the stress down the road, and we're going to face it again, and it's going to cause more stress or cause more problems in our life. So avoidance is like isolation, turning into self-destructive distractions, depleting our ability to handle stress, which puts us back alone into avoidance. It's costly. There's all kinds of things that avoidance causes. So if we're to rethink the stress response, that's going to help us determine if I can make it through. That personal adequacy is I can make it. And what we found in the research is that the amount of adversity that we've faced in life predicts how we're going to respond and how we're going to think about and appraise future stress. So one of the examples of these studies is they had people stick their hand in an ice-cold bucket of ice and see how long they could hold it there. Okay, you can imagine how fun that is? Anyway, so stick your hand in that ice, imagine this, and they'd already taken kind of a history of traumatic events you've been through in life. And they measure how long you can keep your hand in the ice. So, do you think it was those who had less trauma in their life that were able to keep their hand in longer? No. More trauma, the more longer they're able to keep it in there. The only exception were those that had, been severely traumatized by being in a, ongoing domestic violence, and it was still affecting them. Then they withdraw it. But if you've been through any moderate or difficult ones in the past and you resolved it, you're able to handle pain longer. The other thing they did was they had them record afterwards the thoughts that went through their mind. The other thing that correlated with how long you were able to handle pain is what are those thoughts. Now, you guys admitted that you say things to yourself just like I do, right? Okay, so the things that people would say to each other would either be like these catastrophic things. Catastrophic things are like, oh, this is so bad. I can't stand this. I'm overwhelmed. This is too much. This is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. Okay, we say those things sometimes in the middle of stress. So the people that were saying those catastrophic things were able to tolerate pain less. Oops. So we have to think about this. We're able to tolerate more, be more resilient based on how we see things, and part of how we see things is just what we tell ourselves under pressure. Anybody relate with these? And maybe we don't even just tell ourselves, we tell our friends. So what would be an alternate thoughts that we could have go through our mind, or ways of looking at it, or practices that we could start looking at it? Well, how about, I've been through this before. It's going to get better. I'll find a way through that. Sounds like a challenge response, right? All right. So I want you to take 1 minute, consult on, and admit to, let's say the worst thing that goes through, things that go through your mind, and maybe some of the better things that go through your mind. We'll give you option to say both. When I'm at my worst, I say or think this. When I'm at my best, I think this. Ready? Consult. Uh-oh, my battery's going out. Oh, there. Okay, can you hear me? And my battery's going out. Great consulting going on here. And some of you are admitting how you are at your worst, encouraging each other how you are at your best. So let's cover a little bit more research on performance research. How do we find, the performance stress? What is it that you have to do sometimes that you get stressed about? I don't know if you have to give reports, or you have to, you have deadlines, or you need to get up and talk in front of others. But a lot of us have performance stress. So think about that. And some of us have been told, getting ready for performance, think back to when you were on a sports team when you were young. It's like, okay, you're getting anxious, and sometimes it's like, well, I've got to go speak. Just calm down. Just calm down, right? Just calm down. Does that work? No, it never worked for me either. Now, but if I could focus, okay, what am I going to focus on? Start focusing on a goal. Focus on that this, and in fact, what I'm saying to you is this stress is to get you pumped up, to perform your best. Use this stress to, excite you and focus on how you're going to perform. So I've done a lot of research on this, and we found that actually embracing performance anxiety improves performance. That there's a whole bunch of stress as enhancing mindset studies, things like social stress testing. This is kind of like the worst stress experiment you could do with somebody. So what they do is they bring you in and they say, okay, you're going to give a speech in front of a panel that's going to evaluate your speech. And you have like 30 minutes with this materials and you're going to prepare for this speech. All right, so they had, and you get out there and you have to give this short speech to these trained evaluators. Now, they have this set of trained evaluators sitting down, and as you're talking, they're looking at you and they're shaking their head no. And, they're putting their hand on their forehead and going, oh, and they start scribbling furiously and angrily and hard and underline. And then one of them is just kind of drifting his head off into, not even paying attention to you, and then putting his hands up and going, oh, this is like worthless. So how do you feel as the one giving the speech? Yeah, that is horrific, right? The anxiety keeps going. You're feeling horrible about yourself, and they're actually are evaluating you on your performance and how convincing you were, how well-spoken you were, and that kind of thing. So here was the experiment. There were two groups. One group was told, just keep yourself calm. The stress you experience, if you start feeling stress, it could really impair your performance. Okay? Whatever you do, you got to just keep calm throughout and don't let the stress get to you. How do you think those people did? Yeah. Then the other group they were given a short video and a short talk on stress can be enhancing. And when people, in athletic events, in performance events, they look at their stress and they say stress can be helpful to you to make you perform at your best. And it's to help you focus, and it's to help you keep alert, and it's to help you really do your best, because stress is your friend. Found out that those people did so much better handling the stress of a public speech in front of a hostile audience. Job burnout. They've done studies on job burnout, and that what's key there is the attitude toward stress on the job is key to burnout. Looking at stress as something that is okay to have. It's expected. It's a part of my job. Whether that's change or disruption or a cranky boss, that it's just a part of work, those people don't get burned out. People that live in the expectation that my job should be fair and easy and I shouldn't have to expect any stress, it should not be stressful, that's predictive of burnout. They've done this performance research for a variety of people. Students taking exams, taking the graduate record exam, those that understand that their stress, they're just given this brief talk and video on stress can be enhancing. They perform a lot better on their exams than the ones that are told just to calm down or are not given any preparation. And even those that they took groups that are going through the graduate preparation for SATs, and they include the stress talk that is, because the stress talk used to be just keep calm, just keep calm, just keep calm, watch out for that stress. And they started this new one of the stress is helpful for you. Who performs better? It's the people that understand stress as being helpful. So, can we adopt this different mindset that stress isn't toxic, it's actually helpful? Military groups under helps them under their interrogation strategies, law enforcement, and hostage control, if they understand that stress is there to help them. The high levels of stress plus embracing stress, the research shows that that kind of mindset results in the best performance. It's that belief, interpreting the body's stress response as either a threat or as helpful is I can do this or I can't do this. What about daily hassles? We found that daily hassles can kill you. That was the headline out of this big research study. It was the VA study over many, many years. And the headline was, daily hassles kill you. You guys ready to be killed by your daily hassles? Found it 3 times more likely to have died by 2010 than those who reported the fewest hassles. Now the difference was not in the actual hassles. This was a test of how do you view your hassles. It was an attitude, It was an attitude test. I thought I was losing my batteries. Where's that other microphone? Is it back on again? That's back on again. I'll keep this as a backup. You perceive your daily hassles as just bothersome, irritating, the worst thing to go through. Why, is life this way? That was the difference. Those who died reporting being bothered much more by their daily hassles. So the difference between the groups are those that didn't die were the ones that weren't bothered by their hassles. The paradox is this. High levels of stress. Can you hear me? Okay. High levels of stress associated with both distress and well-being. So high levels of stress can make us distressed, or can be correlated with well-being in our life. Well-being doesn't equal just having low stress. Well-being is being able to manage stress in our lives. What's predictive of workplace burnout, job satisfaction, and poor performance indicators? What do you think predicts that? Kind of go along with the same theme. Repetitive worry and negativity. That's what predicts whether we're going to be satisfied with our job or not. It's not the level of demands in our job, the problems that we have with our boss or our coworkers or the environment. Those things, they thought that was going to be the biggest predictor of job burnout. Job burnout has to do with negativity and worry. So fear, the things that I can't control, and the perspective of, nothing's good about this. I can't do this. I can't stand this. I don't like this. Okay. I tend to say, okay, we all need to complain a little bit, right? It's whether we let that complaint. So I like to say, complain every day for 5 minutes, then figure out what to do about it. I don't let my work group come to me with a complaint unless they're also coming with solutions, coming with ideas. Like, they know I'm going to say, what's your idea? What's your solution? What can we do about this? And that's what we need to be doing in our minds, is coming up with solutions and hope and perspective. So if we viewing stress as something that helps us rise to the challenge, something that helps us connect, because going at it alone is harmful, and we're not getting any of that oxytocin that we need, and that stress is there to help us learn. Gives us more energy, more productivity, we are less depressed, and we've got more life and work satisfaction, as well as fewer health problems, and we'll live longer. So just to kind of reiterate, there's the threat hormones, but the rest of the story is all of these other hormones. These balancing hormone chemicals that we have an influence on if we choose to learn, if we choose to connect, if we choose to have a different perspective on our stress in our lives. There is one more hormone I want to tell you about, and that's this fertilizer hormone. It's actually a neurosteroid, BDNF, and there's particular resilient practices that help us get this hormone. This hormone helps us with our performance and productivity. It actually helps us re-establish neural pathways. It's what we call neuroplasticity. We've come to learn in the last 10 years that the brain can regenerate itself, and it has all these positive outcomes. There's two ways that you can best access this brain fertilizing hormone. What might those be? BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor. One is through exercise. Sleep is helpful, but that's secondary to play. Play, joy, laughing. Can you do that throughout your day? Do you have some people that are just fun to be with in the midst of stress? Make you laugh, you joy, then go out and get some exercise at lunch. So the protect and connect response is a critical response that we found a lot of research on. Just squeezing a stress ball by yourself when you're facing a medical procedure versus holding onto somebody's hand. A lot of this research comes out of Kelly McGonigal's book. She says we actually, when we choose the stress response and we see it as helpful, we actually change our biology to one of courage, which ends up looking like we activate the social caregiving system, that's connecting with others or helping others, which reinforces the reward system and the focusing system. It's a combination of the hug hormone, the feel-good neurotransmitters, and the focusing neurotransmitters. So helping others, protecting others makes us social, brave, and smart. Longevity study. They took a group of people and said, how much do you help? How much do you give to others? Those who don't help others, every single life stressor increased the risk of dying by 30%. Regular helpers are inoculated to the stress of death. It's basically longevity. One more. It protects us against disease. Other studies find that this volunteering, non-volunteers, major stressful life events increase the rate of new serious health diagnoses versus those who help others had no effect on new stress diagnoses. Okay, as you walk away from here, you have a mindset switch that you can flip. I want you to be encouraged that we all have the capacity to flip that switch of our current mindset. That we can use the pain of tragedy, loss, or failure as fuel to overcome life's challenges. And that we can choose to fight through and overcome problems versus giving in to them. The quick three-step process is this. We have to acknowledge stress. I hear from some of my engineer friends, stress. I don't have stress. That's that lack of awareness of what's going on in their body and their response. Acknowledge what's going on. Second is to welcome it. Okay, this stress is here for a reason. It's telling me something I care about is at stake. What is that? What's my perspective of it? And what am I then going to do with that stress? How am I going to see it? It's giving me the energy to do something about it. Basically, a meaningful life is a stressful life. So we're going to have more meaning if you're a parent. You know that you've got a stressful life of being a parent, but there's nothing more meaningful. If we live daily by our own values, by our purposes and our goals. Oops, and it stopped. Okay. I want to thank you for being here. I can answer any other questions. I'll be up here for a few minutes. Or those of you that are online, feel free to answer those questions. I want to encourage you to, if you're interested in working on this more yourself, to talk to HR about the coaching program that we have. But for all of you, go out and have a different mindset about stress today. Thank you.